Hello? Hello? Ah, there it is. Your ringtones are amazing. Oh, I love it. So, I had asked about anybody wanting to do a testimony. Nobody came to me. And then in like 3 weeks, I had someone come to me and say, listen, I've been praying about it and I want to give my testimony. So I'm going to tell you mine first, and then Miss Wanda is going to give her testimony tonight. So we're going to get to hear about Miss Wanda. So I'm excited about that. I've been excited since she told me, and I'm like, I'm not telling anybody who it is. I'm going to keep it to myself. So I was really excited when she said she would do it. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. So I can just say from experience that when we do tell our testimony, whether it's hard or not, it is extremely freeing. I think that we want that freedom in our life, but in order to get that freedom, we have to be able to walk in that freedom from the things that have happened in our life. A huge thing is talking about your testimony and giving God glory in what you've been through, because it does break those bondages, those strongholds that we carry, and I think it sets free the footholds that hold us back too. It doesn't give the enemy a chance to get us when we walk in freedom from them. So like I say, I think it's extremely important. And one thing I'll always tell people, it doesn't matter what you've been through in your life. You may look at someone's testimony and think, man, they've really been through a lot. Like, my testimony's nothing. Your testimony is your testimony, whether you think it's big or not. It's big because God finds it important, and it is important. Whether you've been saved and in church your whole life, or whether we've had some of our men in prison for things. We've had men on drugs. We've had all kinds of testimonies. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, it's your testimony, and it's giving glory to God in the things that are hard for you. So I will start with mine, and then we'll let Miss Wanda go. So I did grow up in a home that went to church. I've been in church my whole life. I grew up in the Church of God, and just because you grew up in church doesn't mean that nothing ever happens to you. I know Pastor always jokes about you were born a Christian and you were born saved, and I think there's a lot of sometimes it's hard to be raised and grow up with people looking at you like that, because then you feel like you can't ever have a problem, and that's not good either. So when I was younger, like I say, I grew up in a home, we went to church, and just because you go to church doesn't mean everything is good at your house. So I grew up with parents that I know loved us. My mom was amazing, and I owe a lot to my mom. I think if it wasn't for my mom, we would not be where we are today. I hope that I am half the mother that she was. And she's got her own struggles, but the things she did teach me about being a mom and being strong for myself was huge. So my dad wasn't always the greatest. He would get upset with my mom, and he'd take it out on us. Like, he just wouldn't speak to us because he was mad at her. And I remember nights just we had a 2-story house, and I remember nights just laying on my vent, listening to them fight and argue, and it was just nastiness. And he would leave, and then it'd be months. I remember towards the end of me living at home, it was almost a year that my dad didn't speak a word to my mother and lived in the same house. He would be out real late. We didn't know where he was, and then he'd take it out on us because then we didn't talk to him. So I remember when I was little, my mom would get in this situation with my dad, and he'd be because he would always go in his room and lock the doors. Nobody could talk to him. And so I remember my mom, because obviously I like to talk, I always have, I'm like Josie, she would send me into the bedroom when she knew he wasn't going to speak to anybody. She would make me go in that room and sit me on the bed, and I'd just sit there just blah, 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 to my dad. So, there's a lot of hurt that comes in that. When you're a kid and you're seeing that's what marriage is. When you get mad, you don't speak, you walk away, you don't, none of that is an encouragement whatsoever. So in the midst of all of that, it was to the point that, we'd go to my mom's family stuff and my dad would get mad just because we had to go there and wouldn't speak to my mom. So we knew every holiday was going to be a bad time because he wouldn't speak to her. And so then it was always tense and it was just very frustrating. And then it was going to church, and then there would be my dad at the altar crying, and it was very, that's the example I had of that's what church kind of was. It was very hypocritical, which wasn't good as a child learning that. And so I have my dad's dad wasn't real nice when we were little. He didn't, not that he was mean, but he just kept his distance. And when we were, I'm going to say I was probably 13, he found out he had Parkinson's disease. And it completely rocked his world. And ever since that point, he really opened up to us as grandchildren. And I'm not just saying this, I was his favorite. He'll tell anybody that I was his favorite. But I always spent time with him because he was a Bible scholar once he got his life turned around, and he was just amazing. He passed away, but I owe a lot to him for the desire to want to stay in church because I saw what Christ can do in somebody. And so as a child, I don't know when it all started. I know when it ended, but I don't know when it started. I was very young. But I was actually being sexually abused by my grandfather on my mom's side of the family. And it was years and years and years of it. We'd go to their house, we'd have sleepovers, and, it would be go out to the garage, and there he was, or go out in their woods, and somehow there he'd be, and, there would be times, in the morning, we're all getting breakfast, and he would want me to come in their room, and so I would go in their room, and I'd have to be in there, and I was being abused. For years, this was going on. Even as a child, I was in the doctor all the time because I was having urinary problems, and I think a lot of it was that. Now that I look back as a nurse, I can put those things kind of together. So I was having a lot of issues with that, and I remember as a kid having to go through a lot of testing and not saying anything because I was scared, because I knew how my dad would react knowing it was my mom's dad. How would he have treated my mom at that point? So I was, in a way, trying to protect my mom, but then also scared to talk about it. But then he always told me, this is our little secret. So that's why I don't like when people say, this is our little secret, because that doesn't sit well with me. Especially, my kids should tell me anything. And so, I know that stems from that, because I just don't like that. Don't tell my kids, this is our little secret. I'll get you, I'll come find you, no? But, as a child, I remember I was 12 years old when the last time that it happened. And I remember looking him in the face and saying, you're not gonna touch me anymore. This isn't okay. And I remember that day as clear as it happened just today. And we never spoke of it again. He never tried anything again. And I never told anyone. This was just, my cousin was going through it as well. And so me and her would talk about it. She said something about it, but they never asked me as a child. That never came to me and said anything. So I didn't even know anybody knew this was going on. They all thought she was making things up because she was going through stuff with her mom, and it was just crazy. And so I remember when he passed away, it was my sophomore year of high school, I was overly devastated. My world was crushed, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And I look back and I think, I think it's because I never told him that I forgave him. I never got that opportunity to do that, or to talk about it, to really set things straight about that. But I remember after he passed away, I had nightmares, really vivid, bad nightmares about him. And I mean, it tormented me for a long, because even after he was gone, I didn't tell anybody. I lived all this time with it as my secret, because in my mind, it's my little secret, and I don't want my mom to catch the fall for that, because it wasn't her fault. I never told her. So when Brent and I got married, well, we were dating, and things were getting kind of serious, and I was like, oh, he really probably should know that about me. Like, that's pretty serious. Like, he should probably know that I've been through that. And so I remember one night we were sitting on the couch, and I was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to tell him about this. So I remember telling him, and he sat on the couch with me and just cried with me. And that's right there is when I knew that I could count on him, because I'd never told anybody. And so he sat there and hugged me and assured me that it's okay and that we'll work through this together. He encouraged me to tell my mom, even though my grandpa was gone. He encouraged me to do that, because he said, you can't go your whole life with this being a secret in your life, because that's what it always was, is a secret. And I was like, I don't know, it's gonna kill my mom. And I remember one time my mom and I were talking about something, and don't ever tell somebody something when you're kind of having a disagreement like that. Don't ever break that out, but I did. And I was like, listen, I've been dealing with this, and I told Brent all about this, and it completely devastated my mom. She's like, Samantha, why didn't you tell me? And she was just devastated, completely devastated. And I said, I don't know the answer to that, other than these are the things that I was told as a child for all of those years, and all the things that I had to deal with, like the shame. Now that I'm a teenager, I'm ashamed of that. If someone knows about this, they're not going to want me. I mean, that's, as a kid, you're thinking, that's disgusting. Why would anybody want me after going through that? The way I felt about myself, self-image issues, because you just feel, once you get a certain age, it's not okay. And so, my mom and I talked about it, and I don't even know to this day if my dad even knows, because I'm like, I ain't even going there still. And they're divorced. They got divorced after 33 years of marriage. Jensen was just a baby when they got divorced, because we told my mom, you need to go. I think he might have had an affair. I don't know. I don't really know. But it was over a year that he hadn't spoke to her, and they lived together. So we said, it's time, because I'm not going to allow my children to see that that's what love is anymore. I know what that did to me, and I look at my brothers who are not saved. They don't have a relationship with my dad much at all. I do, because I have chose to walk in forgiveness, which is not something that's easy to come by sometimes. But it's freeing to forgive people. It really is. So I remember when I had to tell my brothers about what happened, because I have an aunt by marriage that she's totally crazy. She wrote a letter to my grandma about 2 years before she passed away, just telling her that her husband was a child molester, and just going on, and mentioned my name in this letter. And so I remember the day I had to sit with my grandma and tell her what had happened as a child. And that really just devastated her. She didn't know. I mean, he hid it very, very well. And so it just really, really devastated her. But we worked through it, and I told her, I said, I don't want you to hold it against him. I don't want you to be mad at him for the rest of your life. I don't want you to view him any differently. I have good memories of my grandpa. I have great memories of things that we did that were good. And those are the things I choose to remember the most. So I remember telling my brothers about it, and they were so mad. And they didn't understand why I didn't tell them. And I said, you're never going to understand why I didn't say anything. And that's okay. That day, they got rid of all the pictures, anything that he had ever given them, they just got rid of it, threw it away. They don't want his name mentioned, they don't want him talked about. I still talk about him because he is a part of my testimony. I think we go through things, and I'm not going to say I'm thankful that I went through it, but I am, because I can't tell you the number of girls that go through the same thing that I have been able to sit and talk to and say, I know what it's like as a little girl sitting in a room, just knowing what's about to happen. I know what it is looking around your shoulder to see if he's coming, if you need to go, if you need to try to run, if you need to try to hide. I know what that feels like. And I'm thankful for my husband who truly helped me through that. When you get married, you don't realize all the things that come up. It's something about the commitment when you say, I do, that all those things from your past can start to just show their ugly little head. And we struggled for a while because I would compare him to my dad. We would get in an argument. And I remember one night, I had a trouble with letting him walk off and just cool off. When you're first married, you have to figure each other out, and you argue a lot more. And so his way to do it was just to go off and cool off. Well, in my life, that means you're not going to speak to me for who knows how long. So I remember one night, he actually called the police on me. I was sat in front of the door, and I would not let him leave our house. I was crying and scared to death because I was like, if you leave this house, you're never going to speak to me again. Over something stupid. And I remember the police coming, and it was a family friend that showed up to our house. Because he knew in himself, because he dealt with a lot of anger with things that he went through. So he knew that he was getting to a point that he was so angry with me, he didn't want to hurt me. And he was like, okay, I'm just calling the police because I don't know what else to do here. So they show up, and I am just a disaster. I am like, wow, I'm such a good girl. I've never done anything wrong in my life, and the police are here. And so from that moment, it did something in me. And I had to realize he is not my dad. He is not going to just walk out and never speak to me. That's not going to happen. And so, those are things we had to work through. And going through sexual abuse, it's hard. It's hard when you get married because you're like, I'm just, self-image issues and just the way you feel about yourself. And, he has always supported me and always said, oh, you're beautiful just the way you are. I'm like, you have to say that. But I have to let him say those things to me because I have to know that about myself. I still struggle, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've accepted who I am, and it is who I am. But I am so thankful that we serve a God that allows us to forgive. Even the hardest things, you can't hold on to things. And it's like people ask me, how do you even forgive someone that's done that to you? Christ. That's the only way that anyone can forgive something like that. And if he was here today, I would look him straight in his face and tell him that I forgive him for everything he ever did to me. I don't allow that to shape what I do in my life now. It is a part of my testimony, and I've been through it. And it hurt. It doesn't hurt anymore. I know I cry about it, but it's because it's where I've been, and it's God has brought me through so much. And there's a lot of trauma that goes with that. And a lot of things you have to work through. But I'm a living testimony that I could have turned out very different. Because a lot of times when you go through sexual abuse as a child, your life turns out very differently. You seek promiscuity, and you seek wanting to be accepted by men, and you want those things. And I am thankful that I had a good enough foundation and grandparents who were praying for me. Now this will make me sad, but when my grandpa died, my dad's dad, my world was rocked, absolutely rocked. He was like a rock for me. But I look at him and I think, Brent looks at him like a grandpa, because he didn't really have grandparents, so that was like his grandpa to him. And I'm thankful. So you as parents and grandparents that have kids or grandchildren that are struggling, don't stop praying for them, because they could be going through stuff that you don't really even realize. And just keeping those prayers open for them can completely change their life. Um, Michelle and I have talked a lot here this last few days. You have to pray for your kids even when it's hard, even when you don't know how to pray for them, just pray. Don't give up on them, and I always just be open with your kids. I know Miss Wanda wanted her testimony recorded tonight, and I think that is amazing. People do, when you tell your testimony, it shows the enemy, I'm not afraid or ashamed of what I've been through anymore. I'm not afraid of you anymore, and I'm going to stand on where I've come from, because Christ got me here. You didn't do anything to get me here. Turn what was meant for evil into good, and use your testimony to help people, even if it is hard. He'll help you through it. He'll absolutely help you through it. So that's just my testimony. So, Miss Wanda, it's your turn. Yeah, you're welcome. I love testimonies. It's all good. Because it's like, kick that, devil. Oh, thanks. You want me to help you up the stairs? Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right. No, I'm going to get my
Okay. She doesn't trust me.
I trust you, I don't trust these stairs. You make me fall off here.
You're so far away from you guys. I wrote it down because you have to talk into the mic now. Sorry. I wrote it down because there's a lot of scriptures that I wanted to share that knew I wouldn't remember just when to put them in. And okay, I'll start out by telling you that there's a Christian television station in Noblesville, Indiana, in case you don't know it. Dr. Wendell Hansen, God spoke to his heart and gave him a burden for the media, for Christian media. We started out with a radio station, and I think the Lord must have said, nope, I want you in Christian television, because God had a plan. Dr. Hansen built it out on Greenfield Avenue. You probably drive by it every time you go home. Excuse me if I get nervous. So God put a strong call on his heart. So he built a station there. It was very much a big undertaking, building the building, buying the equipment, paying all the employees, all the expense that it takes to build a building like that, getting permits. Don, he decided that it wasn't something he could do by himself. So he put on a telethon. He had it on for a week, and Don and I were watching. And each night we watched, the Lord kept whispering to my heart, go volunteer at the station. That went on for about 4 nights, and finally I gave up when I was so puzzled and said, okay. I went over and answering phones, typing, whatever needed to be done. I'd been there about 2 weeks, and there was a couple, Joe and John Winsinger, and they were in charge of the traffic department. The traffic department puts out the broadcast log for the engineer so that he knows exactly what program to put on, what time to put it on, the commercials to put in the breaks, and that was a big job. But they got offered a position to work somewhere else. And Dr. Hansen had only had the station for a few months when I think this happened. I think they began to see that he was really having a struggle. I hadn't been there, like I said, but about 2 weeks, and Dr. Hansen offered me the position of traffic manager and to do these broadcast logs. I went home with a cry in my heart. I knew I had the family to take care of, to learn a new job, to learn what was going on. Besides that, God was moving in my heart about Christian TV. He was getting a hold of me greater every day. So I went in the bedroom and just knelt down at the foot of the bed and just said, Lord, I don't know what's going on. But some words came back to me that I had read a few days before. It takes faith to go across a trackless wild. And I saw the words, are you willing? And I felt, rather than I saw a door open, and I felt God's presence. At that point, a great fear gripped me, and all I could say was, God, you'll have to take this fear away. I knew something was happening. I knew that stepping through that door, a big change was going to take place in my life. God told me that I'd never be the same. And all I could do was pray and cry out for help. And that morning I read in Jeremiah 33:3, if you call on me, I will answer you and show you great and mighty things which you know not of. God was there with a pull on my heart, but with his word strong also. Down the road, God had given me another verse, and it stays with me even now a lot. Jeremiah 29:11. Now this verse is similar to that one, but he directed it to me this way. I have a plan. I have a plan for your life that you cannot comprehend. Stand tall in me, stay close to me, and I will move mightily for you. My mind was so full as I was trying to make a decision about this job and trying to figure out how it would work, taking care of my family, and besides that, God was moving me into an area, and what's going on? But God. That's all I can say at this point is, but God. I had a dream. I was walking along a path, and a tree branch began to stick me in the neck. And it was so annoying, and I just kept brushing it away. And it kept sticking at me. And I finally got so frustrated with it, I just reached up to break it off. And as I did, my eyes went heavenward. I knew it was I knew it was God. And the branch was coming out of heaven, and I woke myself up saying, oh God, no, I mustn't. And at that point, I knew that I was right where God wanted me. That's where he'd been bringing me to. Took the job. God took care of my family. And there were a lot of times when I would feel so low because I could see the struggle that was going on, the finances that weren't coming in, the machinery. They were threatening to pull it out of we had one videotape machine and one film machine. When Davy and Goliath film would break, which was old and was a volunteer film that was sent for the kids, I'd be splicing the film. They were old films. So I kept thinking, they're going to pull these machines out of here. So I went ahead, I took the job. The enemy was trying to keep Christian television from happening. God would give me his word right at the moment I needed it the most. And from my devotional, he told me, "You trembling saints, fresh courage take. The clouds you so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessing over your head." And then it followed, "The Lord shall guide you continually." And again I say, at those very moments, that day before and that day, I knew that I knew that I knew God had me right where he wanted me. My comments in my notes that I looked up when I was working on this was, "God, you surely feed us special food when we call to you from the wilderness." And that's what I felt like I was in. One of the days when my heart was so full of questions, he spoke, which was proof that he was working in a way I couldn't see. "What I do now, what I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter." He was saying, I'm there, I'm working, just trust. Dr. Hansen couldn't get enough finances to get on the air, and I told you that they very quickly were trying to pull the equipment, and the window people were saying, "You have to pay or else." Dr. Hansen knew the station was in deep trouble, and at that point he decided to go to a Christian broadcasters convention. I knew what was going on. My heart was heavy, and being in the midst of it all, I knew things couldn't go on like that again. But God whispered to my heart, "I'm never too early. I'm never too late. I'm always just right on time." And his words fed me. Well, at the Christian Broadcasters Convention, Dr. Hansen, he knew Dr. Summerall, Dr. Lester Summerall, and he walked up to him very boldly, said, "Do you like to buy a television station?" And Dr. Summerall said, "Yes, I would." And I can imagine that Dr. Hansen was kind of surprised that someone would say yes that quickly. But what Dr. Hansen didn't know was that the Lord had been working in Dr. Summerall's heart, telling him that he was going to require 1 million souls a day from him, and he had to have Christian TV to do it. So at this point, I knew that the words that God had been giving me the weeks before, "For the battle is not ours, but God's," that deliverance will come. Sorry. WHMB TV was born. Dr. Summerall's, that's the call letters that he gave it, and it stands for World Harvest Missionary Broadcast. Not only to give out the total gospel, but exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or even imagine. A full gospel and a deliverance ministry with worldwide outreach. I can only stand in awe as the truth of his word penetrated into my heart. And the Lord said, Esther 4:14, "Who knoweth but what we are come to the kingdom for a time such as this." I just thank God for all the precious words that he gave me. It was a time when he had me standing to, I won't say stand in the gap, that's not the word I want to use, but he had me there to stand, to bring Christian TV, full gospel Christian TV, and not let Christian television die. The Lord gave me 3 words to tell to you today. When he speaks to your heart, just say yes. be disappointed. Because when he speaks to your heart and you say yes, there may be some struggles, but he'll bless you beyond anything you can imagine. He did me. I was a total different person when I began to work for Brother Summerall. That whole year was God's boot camp for me. I worked 25 years for Brother Summerall. An awesome time, and I'm so blessed. But that boot camp year was so special to me. Just say yes.
Testimonies can be very, very different, but nonetheless, they can be powerful no matter what you've been through. And don't be afraid to share your testimony. You may feel embarrassed. I remember the first time talking to the youth about my testimony, and I was scared to death. I was like, oh my gosh, there's going to be more people know what happened, and they're going to look at me and be like, oh gosh, you're disgusting. Or, it's all those things that come back and all the things, the doubts that the enemy tries to put into you, that he's not going to take care of it, and your finances are going to show, your kids are going to turn out this way because you're working, and you have all these things that the enemy is going to try to pull from you, but don't let him. You just walk in victory. Like she said, it was perfect. Just say yes. So I encourage you guys to pray about it and really be transparent with each other about your testimonies. If there is one thing that I have learned through years of ministry, is when you share your testimony with other people, it connects you in ways that